I never imagined that moving into what was supposed to be my safe haven would nearly cost me my life. Sunshine Meadows looked peaceful on the outside. Trimmed hedges, pastel-painted houses, chirping birds. But behind those white fences lurked a force far more dangerous than I'd ever encountered. And her name was Karen Westfield. The boxes were barely unpacked when the coughing fit hit me. Sharp, deep, like my lungs were begging for air they couldn't find. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I was diagnosed with stage 3 COPD 3 years ago. The condition didn't creep. It ambushed. One day I was climbing mountains in Colorado. The next, I was struggling to breathe walking from my kitchen to the bathroom. When my pulmonologist said, "Daniel, you need to get to sea level and avoid stairs, allergens, and stress," I knew my life had to change, fast. Sunshine Meadows in Willow Creek, Florida, looked like a dream. Gated, clean, single-story homes. A neighborhood where nothing ever happened, or so the brochure claimed. What it didn't mention was that Sunshine Meadows was also the fiefdom of a woman who treated bylaws like gospel and power like oxygen. And to her, I was a heretic. I'd spent months researching the move. Every detail was scrutinized. The house I picked had everything. Wide doorways for my wheelchair on bad days, a central layout with no stairs, polished tile floors that didn't trap dust, and most importantly, a side patio large enough to host my external oxygen concentrator unit. I installed a dual-mode oxygen system, portable units for indoor use, and a large, high-pressure outdoor system for nighttime support. The house faced the sunrise, which meant fresh morning light streamed into my living room while I sat in my recliner and breathed through my nasal cannula. I even triple-checked the HOA documents. Page 73, Section 8, Paragraph 3. Medical accommodations are protected in accordance with federal and state housing laws. I wasn't just moving for comfort. I was moving to stay alive. What I didn't realize was that my oxygen line, barely visible through the window, was about to become a declaration of war. Call it paranoia or call it preparation. I printed a binder of documents. Fair Housing Act compliance letters, physician notes, ADA guidelines, HOA bylaws, highlighted, tabbed, and organized. I even spoke to the realtor, who reassured me, "The HOA is strict, but your medical needs are untouchable. It's federal law." That statement would prove dangerously naive. On day one, I kept the binder by the door like a legal weapon, half joking my nurse, in case the HOA tries something. She laughed. "You're overthinking. No one's going to mess with your oxygen. Except someone would. Someone who saw compassion as a weakness and rules as weapons. Someone who didn't care if I was wheezing through plastic tubes, only whether the tubes looked ugly through her garden view." The knock on the door wasn't just abrupt. It was angry, sharp, rhythmic, the kind of knock you feel in your chest. I answered, dragging my oxygen tubing behind me. She stood there like she owned the planet, shoulders back, clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. Her hair was a flawless bob, and her lips were lined tighter than the trim on her blazer. "I'm Karen Westfield," she announced, without even glancing at me, president of the Sunshine Meadows Homeowners Association. I hadn't even said hello when her eyes darted past me, into my living room, locking on the oxygen unit beside my recliner. "What's all this?" she asked, voice laced with sour disapproval. I gestured calmly. "Medical equipment. I have COPD. This helps me breathe." Karen made a quick scribble on her clipboard, the pen clicking like a metronome of judgment. "Well, visible or not, it violates Section 12, Paragraph 4. Equipment like this shouldn't be seen from the street." I didn't flinch. Medical equipment is exempt under both the HOA bylaws and the Fair Housing Act. Karen's smile thinned. "I've run this HOA for 15 years. I know our rules better than someone who moved in last week." She thrust a yellow notice into my hands like a summons. "You have 7 days to remove the equipment from view. After that, it's a $100 a day fine." I stood there, stunned. The air around me felt thinner than before, not because of my lungs, but because I knew I'd just met a tyrant, and she had me in her crosshairs. "This is just a routine inspection," Karen said, pushing past me before I even responded. It wasn't a request. It was an invasion. She walked through the living room. eyes scanning every corner like she was casing a crime scene. "Your tubing here," she said, pointing at the floor, "is unsightly. And this," she waved at my oxygen unit, "will need to be relocated." "I've already explained this is medical," I said, my voice tense but measured. Karen didn't blink. "It doesn't matter. We have a community aesthetic to maintain, and you're disturbing it." I could feel my heart rate climbing, which was dangerous for someone in my condition. I reached for my inhaler. Her eyes rolled. "That's what the garage is for," she muttered. She stopped in front of my side window, looking out toward the external oxygen concentrator. "What is that monstrosity?" "My life support," I replied. Karen turned, eyebrows raised. "This is a community of order, Mr. Mercer. We don't do visible machines. You should have submitted a modification form." "I did," I said, "and I have documentation showing the HOA rules allow for medical exceptions. Would you like to see it?" Karen didn't answer. She walked out of the house without a goodbye. But the war had already begun. That night, as I sat on my recliner reviewing my legal binder, a flash went off outside my window. "Camera, flash again." I stepped onto the porch, and there she was, Karen Westfield, at 10:47 p.m., standing on the curb, taking pictures of my house, not saying a word, just clicking and clicking and clicking. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. I was a man fighting for breath, and she was going to make sure I had less and less of it. She didn't flinch, didn't run, didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. Karen Westfield stood in the moonlight, camera in hand, pointing directly at the side of my house like she was photographing a crime scene. Flash, another photo, another entry in her growing case against me. I stared from the porch, oxygen tubing draped around my shoulders, lungs burning with every breath. She finally looked up, eye contact so sharp it felt like a knife. No greeting, no retreat, just a quiet smirk and 4 words that would echo in my mind for weeks. "This isn't over yet." The next morning, a second yellow violation notice fluttered on my door like a scarlet letter. It read, "Ongoing violation of visible mechanical equipment through front-facing windows. Section 12, Paragraph 4. Immediate correction required." Attached beneath, it was a blurry photo of my oxygen concentrator, taken from the street. She was watching. I moved to the window, looked out toward her house. Third one down, with the red shutters and overly trimmed rose bushes. And sure enough, there she was again, standing behind her lace curtain, watching. What kind of person sees medical equipment and thinks, "How dare he try to live here?" I called the HOA hotline. No answer. I emailed the board. No reply. And deep down I knew why. Day 3. Another notice. This one was more aggressive. A printed form taped to my mailbox in bright orange. Final warning. Failure to remove nonconforming visual clutter will result in a $100 per day fine until full compliance is achieved. It was signed, with flair, by Karen Westfield, President, SMHOA. The fine schedule was stapled behind it. There was a note in the margin. "Not above the rules just because you're sick." I stared at that line for 5 minutes straight. I wasn't just a neighbor. I was her project, her personal HOA crusade. I called the Department of Housing, left a voicemail detailing the harassment. I contacted my lawyer. He advised I keep documenting everything, every notice, every photo, every word. So I bought a voice recorder and started wearing it during every interaction. Because the war wasn't just outside anymore, it was moving inside. By the end of the week, I was receiving notices like clockwork. Monday, garbage bins left at the curb 11 minutes after pickup. Tuesday, unauthorized mechanical equipment sighted in vehicle, a spare oxygen tank visible in the back seat. Wednesday, ram protrudes 3 inches beyond allowable length, even though it met ADA standards. Thursday, improperly placed welcome mat. It had a floral design. She deemed it disruptive. Friday, non-compliant lighting, my nightlight, seen faintly through the living room. It was absurd. It was relentless, and it was intentional. I began to feel like a prisoner in my own home, blinds always drawn, afraid to leave anything in plain sight, triple-checking every minor detail. But the notices kept coming, because this wasn't about the rules. It was about control. One afternoon, I returned from a pulmonary therapy appointment to find Karen kneeling behind my car, photographing my license plate. Startled, I stepped out. "Can I help you?" She rose slowly, holding her phone like a badge. "You have an oxygen tank clearly visible in your vehicle," she said coolly. "It's an eyesore. If you must keep medical gear in your car, conceal it, or better yet, remove it. It's a backup tank, and it's protected. Then protect it inside your home, not in public view." I clenched my jaw. That's not how this works. She gave me a thin smile. "I run this community, Mr. Mercer. I decide how things work." That evening, I found a formal notice. Vehicle contains prohibited mechanical equipment. Repeat violation will result in towing and citation. She was escalating. And now, she was targeting my transportation, my ability to leave. And still, she wasn't done. The next day, she lodged a complaint about my wheelchair ramp. "The dimensions are off," she said, clicking her pen. "Too wide. Too long. It's ADA standard," I replied. I submitted the blueprint with the move-in package. Karen sniffed. "I don't recall approving it. And if I didn't approve it, it's unauthorized." For her, it wasn't about legality. It was about domination. I stopped trying to reason with her. I shifted tactics. I went legal. Every notice I scanned and filed. Every conversation I recorded. Every interaction I documented. Dates, times, quotes. I mailed 3 certified letters to the HOA board. Each cited ADA Title II protections, the Fair Housing Amendments Act, Sunshine Meadows' own bylaws regarding medical exemptions. I attached doctor's notes, prescriptions, equipment specs, and a full explanation of my health condition. I even included a list of violations Karen had issued, with timestamps and photos of my equipment. Still no response. Until one night, an envelope appeared under my front door. Typed, "Anonymous. Be careful. You're not the first. Last man who crossed or lost everything. A concerned neighbor." My heart skipped. I looked across the street. Lights on in every window. Curtains twitching. How many of them had seen this before? How many stayed silent? I picked up the envelope, walked to my safe, and locked it away, along with every piece of evidence I collected, because the game had changed. Karen wasn't just pushing back. She was preparing for something bigger. The next morning, I woke up to a clicking noise outside my bedroom window. It was still dark. I pulled back the curtain just a sliver. Karen was in my side yard, clipboard in one hand, wrench in the other. She was standing in front of my external oxygen system, staring at it, touching it, plotting. I backed away from the window and whispered to myself, "She's going to try something." I just didn't know how far she was willing to go, but I was about to find out, and it would nearly kill me. She was out there, in the dark, holding a wrench. I watched from behind the curtain, barely breathing, not just from fear, but from the way my lungs betrayed me when panic took over. Karen stood like a statue beside the external oxygen unit, fingers brushing the metal like she was testing it, plotting. She looked both ways, scribbled something on her clipboard, and vanished into the night. But she had crossed into my property. She was no longer just issuing notices. She was preparing for something dangerous. The next evening, I rolled into the Sunshine Meadows clubhouse, oxygen tank hissing softly at my side, as the monthly HOA meeting began. It was the first time I saw the full board. Karen presided at the front of the room like a queen on her throne, clipboard perfectly centered in front of her. Around her sat the other board members, Tom Jenkins, Linda Chow, Greg Wheeler, and Lisa Davis. The room fell quiet as I approached the microphone. "My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm a resident of Lot 19. I have COPD and rely on life-sustaining oxygen equipment which is protected under both federal law and our HOA bylaws." Karen didn't look up. "In the past 2 weeks," I continued, "I have received 7 violation notices. for which directly reference medical devices. These include portable units, oxygen tanks in my vehicle, and ADA-compliant infrastructure, such as my ramp. These actions constitute not only harassment, but potential discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. Karen's pen froze mid-note. I pulled out copies of the letters I'd sent, the photos Karen had taken, and the anonymous warning I'd received. "I'm not asking for special treatment," I said, voice steady. "I'm asking for the legal accommodations I'm entitled to. If this continues, I will have no choice but to involve the Department of Justice." A murmur swept through the room. And finally, Karen looked up. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer," she said, tone flat. "Your concerns are noted. The board will review the materials." Then she turned a page on her agenda. No apology, no discussion, no acknowledgement. She was shielding herself behind bureaucracy, but I saw something in her eyes. Not anger, contempt. The meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped the floor. The crowd thinned. As I packed up my documents, someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Tom Jenkins, the only board member who hadn't looked away during my speech. He glanced around, then leaned in. "Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We've all noticed what she's doing, but no one wants to say it out loud." "Why not?" I asked. "This is dangerous. She's harassing a disabled person." Tom exhaled. "Karen's been president for over a decade. She knows everyone's dirt. They're landscaping violations, late dues, secret modifications. She's got files, real ones. People don't cross her, not unless they want to lose their privacy or worse." I narrowed my eyes. "You're telling me she blackmails board members?" He looked away. "I'm saying people have tried to fight her before. One neighbor, Chris Mendez, put in solar panels without her approval. He woke up to find we'd killer poured over every flower in his garden. 2 weeks later, he sold and moved. He never filed a complaint, never said a word." I swallowed hard. "She's escalating, Tom." "I know," he said. "But if she's targeting you, you need to be very careful." He looked me in the eyes. "You're not just dealing with a control freak. You're dealing with someone who's used to getting away with it." 2 days later, I did some digging of my own. I found 3 former Sunshine Meadows residents on a local Facebook group. All of them had moved within the last 5 years. All mentioned HOA stress as part of their decision to leave. One agreed to talk anonymously. "She hates being challenged," they wrote. "The moment you push back, she makes it her mission to make your life miserable." I got cited for having a bird feeder. A bird feeder. When I asked for a hearing, she called animal control and said I was harboring feral cats. Took me 3 months to clear it up. Another wrote, "She poured paint on my kid's skateboard ramp. Claimed it was an unauthorized structure. I reported it. Next day, my trash cans were knocked over and someone scratched my car." I stared at the screen. None of them had sued. None of them had stayed. They all did what she wanted. They left, but I wasn't leaving. At first, I thought it was paranoia. But every afternoon, same time, same routine, I would catch her. Sometimes she stood across the street, pretending to walk her dog. Sometimes she hid behind her hydrangeas. Other times, she was bold, direct, just standing in front of my property, snapping photo after photo of the house, the windows, the patio, the oxygen unit. Once, I caught her on video peering through the side window where I kept my portable tanks. When I confronted her from inside, she smiled, tapped her clipboard, and said, "Community inspection," then walked away. My Ring cameras caught it all. I backed up every clip, labeled it, archived it. She was building her case. But so was I. After the 3rd inspection, I'd had enough. I installed a 360 degrees camera system, infrared motion detection, 24/7 cloud recording, with redundant local storage just in case. I posted security notice signs clearly on my property, per the HOA signage rules. Not even Karen could contest them. The first night, the camera picked up 3 separate walk-bys. Karen each time. At 8:12 p.m., she paused near the side yard, phone raised. At 9:45 p.m., she stood on the edge of my driveway, whispering to herself. At 11:03 p.m., she stood at the back corner of my property and took a photo through the gap in my fence. She didn't know I had night vision. She didn't know I had audio. I watched the clips the next morning, stunned. In one of them, she actually said aloud, "I'll teach him what happens when you ignore the rules." I stared at her frozen frame on the screen, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. That wasn't HOA enforcement. That was premeditation. And I knew then, Karen wasn't just preparing a report. She was preparing to strike. 3 nights later, my portable oxygen concentrator's alarm went off at 2:03 a.m. I jolted awake, lightheaded, dizzy, unable to breathe. I stumbled to the wall where the central line fed in from the external unit. No airflow. I checked the valves. They had been turned off. I ran outside. The unit was damaged. The security camera light flickered. I played the footage on my phone. There she was, Karen Westfield, walking into my side yard, wrench in hand, monologuing to herself about eyesores and community standards. Then, disconnected my oxygen unit. I dropped the phone, scrambling to hook up my emergency tank. My vision blurred. My hands shook. And as I gasped for air, I whispered through broken breath. She tried to kill me. My lungs were caving in. The alarm on my portable concentrator blared like a scream through the night as I scrambled for my backup tank, fingers trembling, gasping. Outside, the security footage was still playing on my phone, her voice echoing through the speaker. Let's see how he likes being on the other side of the rules. And then, click, she twisted the valve shut, cutting off my air. The camera had caught everything. Timestamp, 2:01 a.m. Karen Westfield, robe on, hair down, flashlight in her mouth, climbed over the low fence separating her backyard from mine. She carried a small tool pouch. Calm, composed. She moved like she'd done it before, like she knew exactly where the valves were. I lay on the floor inside, dragging the backup tank toward me, vision blackening at the edges. My chest felt like it was collapsing from the inside out. With one last surge, I connected the line. Oxygen rushed back in. I sucked the air through gritted teeth like it was gold. Lifeblood. A second chance. But the damage was done. She'd come onto my property. She'd sabotaged a medical life support system. And she left me to die. This wasn't HOA business anymore. This was attempted murder. My portable alarm was still wailing when I made the call. I hit 911. The dispatcher's voice came through muffled but steady. "This is Daniel Mercer." I gasped. "Someone disable my oxygen system. I can't breathe. I'm stabilized on backup, but I have her on camera." She broke in. "Stay on the line," the dispatcher said. "Police and paramedics are en route. Do not engage with the intruder." "She's gone now. I managed, but I have it on video." The operator's tone shifted. "You have proof?" "Clear as daylight," I said, coughing. She walked up, turned off the valve, and said she was enforcing HOA regulations. "It's all recorded." The silence on the line was brief, but loaded. "Help is on the way, sir. Stay with me." 10 minutes later, I heard the front doorknob rattle. Then, click, the door opened. Karen stepped inside, holding a ring of master keys. Clipboard under one arm, purse swinging, eyes scanning. I sat in the recliner, backup tank hissing beside me, camera rolling from the bookshelf behind her. "What did you do?" I asked through ragged breath. Karen raised an eyebrow. "As HOA president, I have emergency access rights. You refused to answer the door earlier. Given your continued violations, I deemed it an emergency. You sabotaged my oxygen," I said, trembling with rage. "I could have died." She blinked slowly. "Overreaction. You're clearly still breathing. And Section 15 clearly states all external mechanical units require board approval. You failed to submit proper modification forms. You turned off a medical device." She waved a hand. "Aesthetics, Mr. Mercer. Community standards." Her voice had no emotion, no regret, no conscience. Just rules. Always rules. And in her twisted mind, they were worth killing for. She turned, about to walk out again, When I hit play on the camera feed, her eyes snapped back. On screen, her voice echoed, "Let's see how he likes being on the other side of the rules." Then, footage of her twisting the valve shut. She froze. For a heartbeat, the confident, clipboard-wielding dictator faltered. "That's taken out of context," she stammered. "You enter my property. You turn off medical life support. You admitted your motive out loud. It was for the community. This is criminal, Karen." Her face turned to stone. "You don't understand what this neighborhood is," she hissed. "We have values. A certain kind of order. People like you bring disorder. People like me?" I repeated, sick, demanding exceptions, changing the way things look. I didn't have to say another word. The camera saw it all. Her words, her actions, her intent. The door burst open again. Police. Blue light spilled across the walls. Karen spun, shocked. "What is this?" The officer stepped in, hand resting on his belt. "We received a call about a disabled medical device and an unlawful entry." "She's the one," I said. "I have the footage." "Don't be dramatic," Karen snapped. "This is HOA enforcement." "Ma'am," the officer said slowly, "you entered his home, tampered with life-sustaining equipment, and were caught on camera doing so." Karen stiffened. "I have emergency keys. I was conducting an inspection." He looked her dead in the eyes. "Aesthetic violations are not emergencies. What you did could qualify as criminal negligence, breaking and entering, and possibly attempted manslaughter." Karen's face went pale. She dropped her clipboard, while the police restrained Karen. The paramedics checked my vitals. My oxygen saturation was low. Dangerous, but stable thanks to the backup. Another 30 seconds without air. One EMT said grimly, and it could have triggered a cardiac event. As they administer medication, I pointed to my bookshelf camera. "Everything's on there, and the footage from my yard is in cloud storage. I'll give you access." The officer nodded. "We'll need a full statement and digital copies. This is serious." Karen, now handcuffed, thrashed slightly. "You're arresting me? Me? I've served this community for 15 years. And you've probably gotten away with it for 15, the officer muttered. "I was protecting the neighborhood." "From a disabled man on oxygen?" he asked, incredulous. They led her out the front door as neighbors emerged in robes and slippers, blinking under porch lights. Cameras flashed. Voices whispered. The queen had fallen. And this time, she wouldn't get back up. As Karen was stuffed into the back of the police cruiser, her eyes locked onto mine through the glass. Her face was contorted, not with rage, but disbelief, like she couldn't fathom that someone stood up to her and won. But I wasn't done yet, because in the wake of her arrest, the entire neighborhood would erupt. And behind the silence of HOA boardroom doors, the secrets she buried were finally about to come to light. Karen was in the back of a police cruiser. Her face, once smug and untouchable, was now pressed against the tinted glass. Eyes wide, mouth slightly agape, as if trying to convince herself this wasn't happening. But it was. And for the first time in 15 years, someone had called her bluff. I stood on the porch, oxygen tank at my side, neighbors quietly gathering on their lawns. Some whispered, others stared. And suddenly, Sunshine Meadows didn't feel quite so quiet anymore. The lead officer sat across from me, in the living room, body camera blinking red. "We've reviewed your security footage," he said, tapping the tablet. "This is damning. She clearly disables the oxygen line and narrates her actions. That's intent. That's criminal." Beside him, the EMT finished his report. "You were minutes away from a respiratory collapse," he confirmed. "If that backup tank hadn't been pre-connected, well, it could have gone very differently." "I've got backups of everything," I said, handing over a flash drive. Cloud sync, offline storage, timestamps, all there. The officer nodded. "Good. We'll need a formal deposition. You'll be contacted by the district attorney's office. Based on what we've seen tonight, this is no longer just harassment." He stood. "This is attempted manslaughter, Mr. Mercer." I exhaled shakily. Finally, after months of quiet war, someone said out loud, Outside, as Karen was being led into the squad car, she launched into a tirade. Equal parts disbelief and denial. You can't arrest me. I have emergency access rights. The bylaws, read them. The second officer responded with a calm, clipped tone. Ma'am, HOA keys do not authorize entry into private property without consent, especially not for non-emergency issues. Karen pointed back at my house. That unit violated Section 15. It was unauthorized mechanical equipment. Ma'am, the officer replied, now locking the door. He has medical documentation, legal exemptions, and federal protections. You disabled life support. That's not enforcement, that's a crime. The crowd that had gathered didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They simply watched, stunned, as the woman who once ruled every mailbox and flower bed was driven away in handcuffs. For 15 years, Karen ruled like a queen. Tonight, her crown shattered in front of everyone. Back inside, I slumped into my recliner, oxygen flowing steadily. The officers returned one last time to wrap up their report. She's facing multiple felony counts, the senior one explained. Breaking and entering, criminal negligence, tampering with medical equipment, possibly attempted manslaughter, depending on what the DA pursues. I blinked. That's serious? He nodded. Most people don't understand how fragile oxygen-dependent conditions are. She could have caused permanent brain damage or death, and she left the scene. She walked back into my house with no remorse. I added, said I was disturbing the community aesthetic. The officer shook his head. Well, she's going to disturb the county jail tonight. Then, after a pause, he added something I'll never forget. You may have saved future victims by stopping her now. Because that's the thing about people like Karen. They escalate until someone makes them stop. The neighborhood was no longer asleep. Every light was on. Every curtain peeled back. Every neighbor watching. Mrs. Lantham from Lot 3 gasped. Is that Karen? Mr. Dupree from Lot 9 stood in his robe, arms crossed. She always thought she was above the law. Even Linda Chow, one of the board members, appeared in her doorway, stunned into silence. For years, Karen operated with impunity. She was the whisper behind every fine, the shadow behind every anonymous complaint. But now, the silence was breaking. Neighbors started talking, sharing their own stories. She threatened to report me for unauthorized paint color. She once told my daughter her car was too loud for the street. I paid $200 in fines for wind chimes. One by one, her victims realized they weren't alone. And like dominoes, the myth of Karen's authority began to collapse. The next morning, I woke up in the hospital. They'd admitted me overnight for observation, monitoring oxygen levels, stress-induced complications, and potential cardiac strain. The nurse handed me my phone. I had 43 messages. Neighbors, journalists, lawyers, HOA board members. One voicemail stood out. Mr. Mercer, this is Deputy District Attorney Sheila Colton. We've been briefed on last night's incident. Please call us immediately. We're initiating charges, and we'll need your formal statement and full evidence file. Another text came from Tom Jenkins, the board member who had warned me weeks ago. We're holding an emergency HOA board meeting. Karen has been suspended indefinitely. There's more going on. You've started something important. I took a deep breath through my oxygen line and whispered, Good, because this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That afternoon, as I returned home, a black SUV idled in front of the Sunshine Meadows clubhouse. A woman in a blazer stepped out. Clipboard, badge, federal seal, HUD investigator. I watched her walk through the doors Karen once ruled like a tyrant, and I realized this wouldn't just end with an arrest. This would unravel everything. The federal agent's shoes echoed off the tile floor as she entered the Sunshine Meadows clubhouse. Neighbors stood frozen on their lawns. Some whispered. Others just stared. For 15 years, that building had been Karen's throne room, where she ruled with her clipboard, crushed dissent with citations, and buried fairness beneath bureaucracy. But now it was being turned inside out. And I was finally breathing again, not just through my oxygen mask, but through freedom. That evening, I received a call from the district attorney's office. Deputy DA Colton's voice was professional, but I could hear the tension behind it. We're pursuing 4 felony charges: criminal negligence, breaking and entering, tamper with medical equipment, and attempted manslaughter. She paused and added, "We also uncovered prior complaints against Ms. Westfield that were mysteriously dismissed or ignored. It appears there may have been an internal effort to suppress liability." I sat up straight. So this wasn't her first offense? Far from it. You're just the first to catch her in the act and survive. There was a silence between us. You saved others, Mr. Mercer, but we're going to need you to testify. I nodded. I'll do it. She needs to answer for this. Because when power goes unchecked for too long, it stops feeling like power and starts feeling like law. Karen believed she was the law. Now, the law was coming for her. 3 days later, local news stations broke the story. HOA president arrested for disabling disabled residents' oxygen supply. Footage of her being led away in handcuffs played across every channel. The commentary was relentless. Karen Westfield, once a rising star in luxury real estate, was now the face of HOA tyranny gone wrong. Within hours, the Florida Real Estate Commission announced her license had been suspended pending a formal hearing. The charges made national headlines, and public outcry erupted across HOA forums and housing rights platforms. The woman who once boasted of selling over 200 homes now had no listings, no license, and no career. The cherry on top? The real estate agency she worked for issued a public statement denouncing her actions, claiming they were shocked and appalled, and confirming her termination effective immediately. Karen had spent years building her brand, and it collapsed in a single week. The legal process was swift, helped by the airtight evidence I'd supplied and the testimony of over 20 neighbors who came forward once the silence broke. Stories poured out, threats over invisible fence lines, fines for pet noise never verified, intimidation tactics involving anonymous tips to code enforcement. She had ruled with fear, but now that fear had turned to anger, and the HOA board was scrambling to distance itself. In court, Karen appeared pale and aged, her bob limp, her confidence gone. Her lawyer tried to paint her actions as misguided overreach, but the jury wasn't buying it. The prosecutor's closing statement nailed it. This wasn't enforcement. This was ego. This was cruelty disguised as order. And it almost cost a man his life. Verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Karen to 7 years in state prison with the possibility of parole in 5. In addition, a civil suit was filed on my behalf, seeking damages for emotional distress, medical risk, and attempted homicide. The settlement would likely force her to sell her home, the home she prized more than anything, the one she once ruled over. A month later, the for sale sign went up at 103 Golden Grove Lane. Karen's house, her fortress, her kingdom. Word spread quickly. Potential buyers toured the home, curious but cautious. Some even recognized the address from the news. When the listing finally went under contract, I stood on my porch, oxygen tank beside me, as Karen returned one last time to collect her belongings under the supervision of her attorney and 2 officers. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't look around. Until she saw me. I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I simply stood there, present, breathing, alive. My oxygen tubing shimmered in the sun. Her eyes locked onto it like a dagger. And then something strange happened. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen Westfield was speechless. It was poetic. The woman who had tried to strip my rights, disable my life support, erase me from her perfect little postcard of community, now stood on the outside, evicted by justice, erased by truth. And I stood there, in plain view, my oxygen equipment visible through my front window, just like it had always been. I wanted to say something clever, maybe even something angry, but instead, I just let the silence do the talking. Because some moments don't need words. Just clarity. Just consequences. Just breath. 2 weeks after her departure, the Sunshine Meadows HOA held a public meeting. Tom Jenkins was elected interim president by unanimous vote. One by one, Residents stepped forward and dismantled the rules Karen had enforced like weapons. The board voted to waive all outstanding fines issued under her leadership, reinstate accommodations for all disabled residents, install an oversight committee to prevent abuse of power, approve my medical accommodations permanently. HUD sent a formal letter of commendation for my documentation and resilience. And best of all, I got a new neighbor, an elderly retired nurse named Clara. She brought me banana bread on move-in day and said, "I saw your story on the news. You're a fighter." I smiled. Not just me. The whole neighborhood fought back. Karen tried to take my air away, but what she really gave me was a reason to fight. And now, every time I sit on my porch, tubing in place, the wind brushing past my face, I think of one thing. This is what justice feels like.